Live from the Average Joe Nation studios in St. Clair, Missouri. This is the Average Joe Podcast, a show that proves that in this crazy world, a combination of common sense and a C-plus average is actually a superpower. Sure, he's crazy, but what if he's right? Please welcome your host, Damon Gilbert.
Good day. How are we doing today? I wanted to talk about something that I actually know about. So this they always say, talk about things that you know about. I know about United Parcel Service. I do. I spent 20 years there. I retired from there. Went on to do other things. Don't get me wrong. I didn't actually retire. I just changed occupations. But after 20 years, when I started in, 1985, April 1st, April Fool's Day. And at the time, I thought it was an April Fool. After about a week working there, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? But I just want to kind of weigh in on this, the latest, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but UPS is planning a strike at the end of July. And they're giving a deadline, I think, of June 30th, which would be today, for UPS to offer their best and final offer. And it's going to be interesting to see what comes up, because I don't think they're going to give them what they want right now. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I know quite a bit about it. And I went through a strike in 1997. It would have been August 4th of 1997. Back then, we were making good money. Don't get me wrong. UPS is a great place to work as far as dollars are concerned. Working conditions are a little bit different. So when people talk about this, now right now they're the press, which they did back in 97, are pushing the amount of money that these guys make a yearly basis. Right now they say the average is $95,000 a year. It's probably accurate. I would say it is. But I got to tell you, folks, and believe me, I'm speaking for every UPS driver and part-timer out there, anybody that works in a warehouse. It is the hardest job you will ever have in your life. It is not for everyone. Not everyone can do this, okay? It's a difficult job. It's difficult conditions. It's cold. It's hot. It's dirty. You are running 100% of the day. There's very little time to chill for the most part. They expect you, they measure every single thing you do there. And I want to make sure people understand that. And the reason they're going on strike, I'll get into that here in just a minute about the conditions and stuff, but the reason that they're actually threatening a strike is a number of reasons. But one of the most important reasons is the fact that they have a two-tiered wage system right now. That was the issue back in 97. Hasn't changed. 26 years later, they've attempted to do the same thing. They've got a new CEO. She makes $19 million a year. It just doesn't look good. They are the largest package carrier in the United States, other than the Postal Service. And the Postal Service is a completely different set of rules, and it doesn't really abide by anything. It can be subsidized by the U.S. government. They can run at a loss forever, and so they're kind of it's kind of unfair competition at UPS, and it was back in in 85 when I started there, and it hasn't changed at all. There's still unfair competition. They can literally lose money on every package that they take and deliver, and just roll over the loss into their first-class mail system, which is subsidized by the federal government. Don't let anybody kid you. Just because it's called the United States Postal Service for a reason. They are part of the government. But that's a completely separate issue. The point is that you're talking about 20 million packages a day that move through this system. It's going to disrupt the economy in the United States. It really will. I don't know if the Biden administration will get involved in this or not. They did in the rail strike. They may get involved in this and just force everybody to go back to work and go back to the negotiating table. That would probably be what I'd expect. But I don't know. There's no guarantees on that. Joe Biden is, by default, and I'm not going to go into what I feel about him, but he is by default supposed to be a union president, somebody for collective bargaining, all that. I mean, he likes to think he's, He's for the working guy, which is complete nonsense. But that's aside. Okay, right now they've got over 350,000 employees at UPS. Now these people are all under one contract, so it's not like FedEx. If they had organized, and that's another story too. FedEx should have organized years ago. They didn't, and it's going to cost them. What do I mean by that? Well, I believe the CEO came out a few weeks back and said that he hoped in 3 years that they would not have any drivers whatsoever, any company drivers whatsoever. So that means they're going to outsource all of this. And I want to make something very, very clear here. When you get a package from FedEx Ground, because I work for them as well. I've worked with a union. I've worked without a union. With a union is much better. Okay? Don't let anybody kid you. I know you'll hear from older folks and some people who have dealt with, not real good unions will tell you, oh, they're a waste of time paying those union dues now. No. I'm here to tell you, being in a union is the best thing you can do for a working man, because at the end of the day, the people who claim that unions are bad and love to, I talked to hundreds of them. There was a push to unionize FedEx when I was working there. I was a line haul driver, tractor trailer, the doubles that go up and down the highway. I was pulling those at night, and I talked to a lot of guys when there was this union push came up. And a lot of the old timers were not in favor of a union. But I used to ask them, I said, would you go into court without a lawyer? Lawyers are scumbags. Don't get me wrong. I don't like lawyers. They're a necessary evil. Sometimes you have to have them. No sane man goes into court without a lawyer. As a matter of fact, most of the time, the judge won't even allow it. Okay? You have to have representation. You have to have somebody looking out for your best interest. It's the same thing here. You cannot go in to imagine 350,000 employees. What, we're all going to go in and ask for a raise at the same time or individually? No, that's not going to happen. You have to have someone who is in charge of this, someone who is looking after your best interest. Now, I'm not saying they're not corrupt, okay? Unions usually are. I'll be the first to admit it. Unions are a necessary evil for the working man, an uneducated man. When I mean uneducated, I mean no degrees, that kind of thing. And when I was working there in 85, when I started, I was really surprised to find how many people worked at UPS who had degrees. They had degrees. I mean, business. I knew a biologist, teachers. Yeah. And why did they work there? Because they made good money and they paid you. They paid you very well for what you did. But I'll tell you what, folks, they expected a lot. They expected you to be working every minute of every day. Okay? Most people don't realize that. You have no idea what kind of conditions are involved here. Be it inside or the drivers. They want you working every second of every day. They really do. They do. We don't care if it's hot. We don't care if it's cold. We want those packages delivered. It's that simple. So, now, what I'm getting at here is that this is a job that most people can't do. And the people who do it work very hard. And they know it. The company knows that. They've got a great group of people working for them. I guess their population that works there, their employees. The group is some of the best you'll ever find. They really are. You have to be smart to be able to do this job. You can't be an idiot and do it. Now, they've made it a little bit simpler. Back when I was doing it, there was no GPS. You had to look up post office boxes. You basically had to know where people lived. And you did that by repetition and finding out. But that's aside. I don't want to sound like the old guy. I remember when I was a kid. No, I'm not going to do that. But at the end of the day, those packages do not get from the truck to the customer by themselves, okay? And folks, I'm telling you, when I used to roll out of that building in the morning, I would have a truck that was completely full of packages. No kidding. Sometimes you couldn't even get the door closed. They were so full. And then you get to your first stop. It was usually a bulk stop, maybe a Walmart or a box store of some kind. You couldn't get the door up in the back because the boxes would shift because you didn't load it. It's loaded by a part-timer, which is somebody who working inside, an inside person. It is really tough. And then when you come back at night, the truck would be full again. So you've actually unloaded the truck of all those packages, and then again you filled it back up with packages going out that night that were going to be unloaded by people working in the evening. Okay, now the problem is the biggest complaint here that I can read, that I can see, because I'm not there anymore, and I have some inside people that I know that still work there, but from what I understand, it's the two-tiered wage system. Okay, now there are people working side by side who've been there probably years past their seniority date, when they reach the top of the tier of wages, who are making $4 to $5 less than the guy that's sitting right beside him because he's under a different contract. Now that's not good. That's not good. You're doing the same work, the very same work, and on top of that, they're abusing the part-time pool. That's what they're doing. What they're doing is typically a part-timer, somebody who loads the trucks or unloads the trucks or washes the trucks. I mean, there's all kinds of jobs involved in this. I mean, when I was working there, it was 185,000. Now there's 350,000. So obviously the operation has almost doubled. Okay. So the part-timers typically work a minimum of 3.5 hours a day. I know it doesn't sound like much, and it's not. But most of the time they work at least 5 hours, and they get benefits. They get health insurance, they get 401k, they've got retirement. You go down the list. They get all of that. So it's a pretty good job, pretty good part-time job. So they're guaranteed 3.5, and they can't work over 5. So what they will do right now, and they were doing this back in 1997, prior to that, and that was one of the reasons we struck in 1997. They were abusing the part-time people. And what I mean by abusing is they would ask someone, okay, say you're working a part-time job in the morning, get there at 4 o'clock, usually by 8 o'clock you're gone. Okay, now during peak it's at least 5 hours, maybe sometimes 6. But anything over 5 is overtime. And the last thing UPS wanted to pay was overtime pay. They don't like doing that to the part-timers. They'll pay the drivers that. They don't care about that. Overtime is not even an issue. As a matter of fact, it gets to the point where you work so much overtime that you would prefer to work just 8 hours. Isn't that terrible? You actually literally had to ask for an 8-hour day when I worked there. You would have to do it in advance. Say you had an event going on that your kid was in or something, you had to be off at a certain time and be there. You would have to do an 8-hour request. Now, I don't know if they still have that or not, but I got a feeling they got something similar. You would have to fill out a form and tell them, hey, I only want to work 8 hours tomorrow. Oh, okay. Because normally you work 9.5, 10. I've worked as much as 12 on a regular basis. But what they're doing to the part-timers, the guy who starts at 4 o'clock in the morning works, let's say he works 4 hours. He's gone at 8. Okay. Supervisor will come up to him and say, hey, would you mind working tonight? Okay, well, if you volunteer, now this is the way it was in 97, if you volunteer, anything over 8 is not overtime. And in his case, anything over 5 would be. So what they're doing is they're working people sometimes 10 hours a day with no overtime and making them come in 2 different separate times to their facility. Pretty hard to get sleep when you're doing that. It's pretty hard to have a life of any kind when you're doing that. And I understand completely what they're talking about. I do. This strike is probably, it's called for. It really is. I think UPS made $11 billion last year, if I'm right, if I read that right. This is something that affects everyone. And I know people don't understand for the most part. They think unions are terrible. But if it weren't for UPS and the unions as a whole, a lot of the country would be working for a lot less per hour, just because they haven't been forced to raise their wages. There's no one pushing that, and in this case, it's the Teamsters. It really is. So they've got two issues. It's called the 20. What is it? I'm trying to think what it is. The 22.4s, I think it is. I think that was in 2022. They're making $4 less an hour than their coworker. Okay, that's the one. They want to get that back up to where everybody's making the same amount. They want to, my guess is they probably want to increase the starting wage, because when I was there, it was $18 an hour. I think it was $18 an hour. Maybe it was less than that. It's been so long I can't tell you, but from what I'm reading, it's basically the same thing as in 1997. And we were out for 15 days. And we got lambasted in the press because everybody was explaining that they were overestimating how much we made an hour. What they were doing was they were taking into consideration your benefits package, adding that to the your actual wage, and then claiming that that's what you made a year. Well, it was a little misleading because you didn't really take that money home. So be really careful when you listen to this stuff. And it's coming. I'm telling you, it's going to disrupt the economy. It will. If they go out on strike, it will disrupt this economy. It will damage it terribly. I don't know what Biden's going to do. He probably doesn't even realize what's going on at this point, but his labor secretary probably does. There's a lot going on in this behind the scenes. And I just want to make it very clear that this is the hardest job I ever had. Okay, I was good at it. I was really good at it. I have a good work ethic. I was extremely good at this, but it was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. Working inside, I did that on occasion. That's a slave camp. Pardon the the word, but it is. It was hot. It was dusty. It was terrible. Now, I have seen that they're talking about putting air conditioning in these trucks. I don't know how that's going to work. I really don't. You are not in that cab for very long. Now, in tractor trailer, they have those, and they've always had air conditioning in tractor trailers because these guys are sitting there for hours going from terminal to terminal. You really couldn't go without air conditioning there. That would be harmful to your health. But in a package car situation, when you're in and out of it, maybe, I don't know, depending on the route you're on, the routes I had were usually 100, 120 stops a day, and that's not including pickups. Okay, so you're in and out of this vehicle quite a bit. Putting air conditioning in, I think that was a ploy on the management's side to try to attempt to get people to come around and maybe solve this thing before it got into to the 11th hour. It's not going to work. UPS, when I worked there, it was always called. It was kind of a mixture of things. It was a cross between the Marines and the Quakers, or the Amish. It really was. They expected a lot. They expected a certain kind of appearance. I mean, for instance, I could not have this at all. My mustache could not be below the corner of my mouth. I could not have hair on my collar. Tattoos were out. Earrings were out. Forget it. Your shoes had to be shined. You had to wear a belt. And at the time when I started, we didn't wear shorts. Okay, they implemented that about 10 years later after I'd started, which was nice. It made it a lot cooler. It did. But I'm telling you, folks, listen to these drivers. I'm telling you, this is the hardest job I ever had. And I have a great work ethic. I mean, I go out, I get the job done. When I was when I was working there, I always had a feeling of accomplishment when I come back and everything was done. It made you walk taller. It made you feel proud that you were a UPS driver, because most people don't know how hard this job is. None of my friends did. They would always laugh. They'd say, "Well, I saw you walking across the street with an envelope in your hand." Yeah, but you didn't see me unloading the 300 packages in the back of that thing, when it's 95 degrees out. Okay, so I just want everybody to understand this is a very serious thing going on right now, and this strike is very pivotal for the rest of the country. If they don't get this right, part-timers will become, eventually, another 20 years from now, that may be all there is, are part-timers. Right now they've got, package delivery out of your personal vehicle. They're trying that too. So what they're doing is they're hiring stringers to go out, and anything that's left over or any overflow, they give it to these guys and they go run it in their personal car. Bad idea. We didn't have that when I worked there. That would have been taboo. Another thing that they're big on is supervisors working. That was always an issue when I was there. Supervisors are supposed to be, they're not supposed to have any arms. That was what they used to say. I have no arms. I can't pick anything up. That's the way. I'm supposed to be like that. I'm not supposed to touch anything. I'm not supposed to move anything. That is union shop labor, and that's where it's supposed to be. So I hope I've helped a little bit for people to understand how serious this is. It's going to come down to the wire, and I think they're going to strike. They've got a lot more unity than we had in '97. They've got a great leader. Hoffa is gone. They've got a guy named Sean O'Brien, who in fact was a UPS driver at one time, which I think is a great thing. Back when we struck in '97, we had Ron Carey was our leader, and he was a New York City delivery driver. He knew how the company worked. He knew how hard that job was, and he knew how absolutely not hateful. It's probably the wrong word. Management's not very nice there. Okay, they're taught to be that way. They actually send these supervisors. I know they may not do it anymore, but when I was there, they used to say, "Oh, okay, such and such is a supervisor now. They're going to send him to hate school." Okay, and that was a place where they sent and they indoctrinated these guys to believe that, in other words, they bled brown. They really did. They would come back changed people. Okay, at one point, I had supervisors that I really, really kind of liked, and they saw it as the way the world worked, how this job worked, and they were easier to deal with. They didn't demand you do it. They knew you knew your job, and they knew the things you could come up against on a given day. But man, once they went to that school, that stuff took a back seat to everything. It was making money and delivering packages. End of discussion. I used to say, "Hey, I could drop over dead, and your biggest." I've told this to supervisors. I said I could drop over of a heart attack, and your biggest concern would be who's going to run the rest of those packages in my truck. Swear to God, that's the kind of place you're talking about. It is the Marines, and you got to be a special person, probably an idiot. I mean, at the end of the day, I felt like there were times when I would go, how did they convince me to do this? To become so dedicated to this. I mean, when they would say ridiculous things, I would tell people what my supervisor would say. They go, "Well, that's crazy." And I would, in the back of my mind, I go, "Yeah, but that's how we operate. It's deliver the packages, end of discussion. There's no getting around it." Yeah, so at the end of the day, folks, and I just want to make sure everybody's clear on this. This is serious, and it's going to affect the economy. You're probably not going to hear anything about it for a little bit, but I'm just giving you a heads up on this. I think they're going on strike. I think they had a vote. I think it was 99% to go on strike. I think that the Sean O'Brien, I think membership is demanding that he go on strike. They want to put their foot down. They're tired of this two-tiered system. They're tired of treating these part-timers like slaves, and it's time to put your foot down. And I think the Teamsters really believe that this will be the largest strike by organized labor in the 21st century. And it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a big one. So anyway, that's all I got right now. If you like this video, I know people hate it when you say this. Hit the like button down below and subscribe to my channel, because I talk about things like this all the time. So anyway, that's all I got today, folks, and I will talk to you later.
As always, thanks for listening to the Average Joe Podcast. Be sure to check out our website at www.averagejoenation.media and follow us on social media. Remember, if you haven't told all your friends, you're wrong.